Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Cosmos channel. Tonight we ask a question that sounds like it should keep you awake. Why is Jupiter the most dangerous planet? And then we let the answer undo itself in your hands. Because the truest thing about danger, when it lives 400 million miles away, is that it becomes something closer to wonder. A giant so vast, so wild, so charged with lightning and crushing pressure, and yet none of it can reach you. Not tonight. Not ever. Really, you are only here to watch it. The way you might watch a storm move across a distant valley from the window of a house that will never flood. That is the picture I want you holding as we go. A shore, far and safe, and a storm you are simply allowed to witness. To help you hold it, imagine a single thread, thin, pale, almost weightless, running from the center of your chest out across the dark, all the way to that giant world. Not a rope pulling you toward anything, just a thread, loose in your fingers, that lets you feel the distance without ever having to cross it. You can let it unspool as far as it wants tonight. It will always lead back to you. We have 4 slow regions to drift through tonight, and you can let all 4 go, because I will carry them for you. First, the far shore, where we simply arrive, drifting close enough to take in the size of this giant without ever touching its edge. Then the weather you can see, the bands and the storms and the far-off lightning, all of it painted calm across the clouds like something breathing. After that, the invisible deep, where fields and radiation and darkness press downward, felt only as a hush beneath the color. And last, the storm that guards the shore, where all that wildness turns out to be a kind of shelter, quietly watching over smaller, softer worlds, including, in its own far way, our own. If this thread of thought is one you'd like to keep holding on other nights, a like or a subscribe helps the channel reach others who are also lying awake, somewhere out there, looking for a slow place to land. There is nothing here to hold on to, and nothing you need to remember. Let your shoulders ease down into wherever they're resting. Let your jaw loosen, your hands go heavy, your breath find its own unhurried rhythm. The thread is already drifting outward on its own. You don't have to follow it, only feel it going. Settle in. Let's begin. Let the evening settle around you the way water settles once a stone has finally stopped sinking. You are lying down now, warm, unhurried, and outside the window the sky is doing what it has done for longer than any of your worries have existed. It is turning, patiently, and bringing something bright up over the rooftops. Find it if you can, low in the east or hanging somewhere over the dark line of trees. A point of light that does not flicker the way the little stars do. It burns with a steadier flame, an older kind of patience. And once you notice it, you will keep noticing it, because after the moon and after Venus, this is the brightest thing the night sky owns. This is Jupiter, rising for you, and rising for no other reason than that the solar system turns and turns, and tonight it is Jupiter's turn to climb. There is no need to hurry your eyes toward it. It will still be there in 10 minutes, and in an hour, climbing its unhurried arc the way it has climbed the same arc on 10,000 other nights before this one, and will climb it on 10,000 nights after you have long since fallen asleep. Notice how it simply holds its place among the true stars, neither twinkling nor dimming, a single held note against a sky full of small flickering ones. That held note is itself a kind of company. It asks nothing of you. It only keeps rising, keeps burning at the same patient brightness, and lets you borrow its steadiness for your own. People noticed that steadiness a very long time before telescopes existed. Ancient watchers, lying on rooftops or hillsides, much as you are lying now, saw that most stars kept their places against one another, locked into their same patterns night after night, while a handful of lights wandered slowly through them, sliding across the fixed backdrop over weeks and months. They called these lights wanderers, and this one, the brightest and steadiest of the wandering lights, they gave the name of their king of gods, the ruler of sky and storm and thunder, the highest seat among all the old pantheons. It is a fitting old habit of ours to look up at the least reachable thing and hand it the grandest name we have. You do not need to know the mythology to feel why they chose it. There is something in that calm, unblinking light that asks to be called royal, something that asks to be taken seriously, even from here, even at this distance, even by someone who is only trying to fall asleep. And distance is exactly the word to rest on tonight, because distance is going to become the quietest, kindest fact in this whole story. That point of light hanging there over the rooftops is not close. It only looks close the way anything looks close when it is large enough and bright enough to punch through the darkness between here and there. In truth, Jupiter sits about 5 1/5 times farther from the Sun than the Earth does, 5.2 astronomical units. If you want the tidy number, which works out to something like 780 million kilometers of open, empty, uneventful space lying between where you are breathing right now and where that great light actually burns. Say it slowly, and let the size of it settle into you. 780 million kilometers. If you tried to drive that distance in a car without ever stopping, without ever sleeping, it would take longer than all of recorded human history has lasted twice over. Even light, which crosses this room in less time than it takes your eyelids to fall, needs the better part of an hour to make that crossing. What you are looking at, when you look at Jupiter, is a light that left its source a good while before it ever reached your eye, a small, gentle proof that even something enormous can only ever reach you as an echo, softened by the sheer breadth of the space it had to cross. Set that number beside a smaller one for a moment, just so the scale can settle properly. Our own moon, the one that sometimes hangs full and low and close enough to feel almost near enough to touch, sits only a few 100,000 kilometers away. Jupiter is farther than that by a factor of thousands. Whatever unease a storm that size might otherwise stir in you, let it dissolve against that comparison, because unease needs closeness to survive, and closeness is the one thing tonight's storm has been denied. It has been denied it since the solar system first settled into its shape, billions of years before either of you existed, and it will go on being denied it for as long as the two of you share this particular arrangement of orbits. Hold on to that feeling, because it is the whole shape of the night ahead of you. Picture yourself standing on a shore, not a shore of sand and salt water, though you may borrow that image if it helps you drift, but a shore made of plain cosmic distance, a shore so wide that nothing standing on the far side of it can ever set 1 foot on your side. Out there, past the horizon, past the reach of any wave, a storm is turning. It has been turning for longer than anyone alive has been alive. It is vast, and by any measure you like it, is genuinely one of the most extreme, most violent, most overwhelming things the solar system has ever assembled in one place. And yet here you are, safe on your shore, wrapped in blankets, and the storm cannot cross the water to reach you. It never could. It never will. Distance itself is the blanket tonight. Not a metaphorical comfort you are asked to believe on faith, but a plain physical fact. 780 million kilometers of it, lying between the two of you like a moat too wide for any storm to swim. This is the shape every part of tonight's story is going to take. You are going to hear about winds that would flatten a city, about lightning bolts stronger than any that have ever split a sky above your own head, about a kind of gravity that could press the breath flat out of you, about radiation fierce enough to end a life in minutes. None of it should feel like a warning aimed at you, because none of it is. Every single one of those facts belongs to a world that sits on the far side of the widest moat in the neighborhood of the sun. You get to hold each one at arm's length, turn it over, admire the strange, enormous shape of it, and set it back down exactly where it belongs, out there on the storm's side of the water, never on yours. That is the promise threaded through everything that follows tonight. Watch and rest, and never once worry that the watching will pull you in. So here is the honest question this whole night is built around, the one worth asking slowly before you let your eyes close a little further. How can a planet, a thing with no army, no intention, no appetite for anything at all, be called dangerous? A storm needs no malice to be called a storm. A cliff edge needs no malice to be called a drop. Jupiter, it turns out, earns the word the same plain way, not because it reaches for anything, not because it wants to, but because of what it simply is, sitting out there, being enormous and being itself. Danger, in Jupiter's case, is not a verdict about character. It is only a description of scale, the natural consequence of a body large enough that its ordinary, unhurried existence would be unsurvivable to anything small and soft that tried to stand too close. And you, lying here on your safe shore with a shore's worth of kilometers between you and it, are in absolutely no position to stand close. You are only in a position to look and to wonder, and to let the wondering carry you gently toward sleep. Notice, too, that the question itself is an invitation rather than a warning, the kind of question a curious mind asks when it is finally unburdened enough to be curious. You are not being asked to brace for anything. You are only being asked to keep watching the far shore a little longer, the way you might watch surf break against rocks from a warm porch, feeling the size of it in your chest without ever feeling it against your skin. That is the whole art of tonight, to let scale astonish you instead of alarm you, to let the word dangerous become, by the end, simply another word for magnificent, held safely at arm's length. Before we can understand why it is dangerous, though, we should first understand what it actually is, because the storm on the far shore is not a rocky place at all, not a cousin of the ground beneath your own house. It is something stranger than that, something without a floor to stand on and without an edge you could ever walk to. A world built out of almost nothing but the lightest gases there are, spinning so quickly that it has pulled its own shape a little out of round. Let your breathing slow, and let the light in the window keep climbing, and we will turn now, softly, toward the question of what kind of object you are actually looking at when you look at that steady, wandering, king-named point of light. So let the question rest there for a moment, unanswered, the way a held breath rests before it's let out. How can a light this friendly, this steady on the shore dark water, carry any danger at all? To find out, you don't need to cross the strait. You only need to look closer at what is actually rising out there. What kind of body is throwing that long, pale coin of light across the waves toward you? It is not a place with ground. That's the first, strange, almost restful thing to understand about it. If you imagine yourself drifting toward it, sinking slowly down through its outer air, the way a leaf settles through still water, there is no shore to arrive at, no stone underfoot waiting to catch you, only more air, and then air grown thick as syrup, and then air pressed so hard it forgets it was ever a gas at all. Jupiter has no surface the way your bed has a surface, no floor the way a room has a floor. It is depth all the way down, a held breath of a world with nothing solid at its center to exhale against. And somehow that absence of ground is part of what makes it safe to think about tonight. There is nowhere on it for anything to stand, nowhere for danger to plant its feet and walk toward you. It simply turns out there, a body of depth without shore of its own. This is worth sitting with a little longer because it changes the whole shape of what you are watching rise over the water. Every dangerous thing you have ever pictured before tonight likely had a place to stand. A cliff edge, a dark road, some solid ground beneath it. Jupiter offers no such place. Whatever moves through it moves through open air from the first cloud tops to depths deeper than any ocean on your own world, air becoming something like a very slow liquid, and only far below that, past any distance a messenger could ever safely cross, does that liquid begin to behave like a kind of metal. There is nowhere along that whole long fall to plant a flag, nowhere to call the ground. A world without a floor cannot, in the end, come looking for you. It can only keep turning, patient and unfooted, out past the reach of the tide. And it is enormous in that turning. Set 11 Earths side by side, like 11 coins laid edge to edge across a table, and their combined width would just span the face of it. Picture our whole blue and white homeworld shrunk down to something you could hold, and then 11 of those, touching, a long unhurried row, that is the doorway Jupiter fills in the dark. And yet for all that vastness, what it is made of is almost embarrassingly light and simple. Hydrogen, mostly. The same thin breath of a gas that fills party balloons and laces the space between stars, and helium beside it. The same pairing of elements that fills the sun itself, that same golden light you may have felt on your skin on some long afternoon now folded into memory. Jupiter is built from sun stuff. It is, in its ingredients, a near cousin of the star it circles, gathered instead into a colder, quieter shape, never given the chance to blaze. Because, and here is the detail that turns the whole picture gentle instead of dreadful, Jupiter tried in a sense, and it never caught. To become a star, a ball of hydrogen has to be squeezed by its own weight until the pressure at its heart lights a fire that never goes out, hydrogen fusing into helium, the furnace that keeps every star burning through the night sky. Jupiter is heavy, yes, heavier than every other planet combined, more than twice the mass of all the rest of them added together, but it would need to be something like 80 times heavier still to reach that threshold, to feel that spark catch inside it. So instead it simply sits, warm from its own slow compression but never alight, a fire that never caught, an ember that stayed an ember instead of becoming a flame. There is something almost tender in that image, if you let it settle, a star that almost was, that instead became something quieter, something that only reflects the light of its neighbor rather than making its own. The most massive planet in the whole family of planets, and still, at its heart, unlit. You can rest easy knowing that whatever moves in its clouds tonight, it is not the light of a second sun turning toward you. It is only sunlight, borrowed and thrown back, drifting the long safe distance to your window, the way a lighthouse beam is only ever a small fire, magnified, sent out across water that never has to carry the flame itself. Think of it, if it helps, as a coal pulled from a fire long ago and left to sit on cool sand, still holding warmth from deep inside itself, still faintly glowing if you looked closely enough with the right instrument, but never again capable of catching. Never again able to leap up into flame the way it once might have when the fire around it was young. Jupiter formed from the very same swirling cloud of gas and dust that built the sun at its center 4.5 billion years ago and more, gathering itself from the same leftover breath, but it gathered a little too late, or a little too little, to become anything more than the largest ember in that family. It is, in that sense, the almost sibling of your daylight star, enough like it to be built from the same stuff, unlike it in the one way that would have made it burn. But if Jupiter itself stays cool and dark at the center, its outside does something almost the opposite of restful, and it is worth knowing this too, gently, the way you'd note the shape of a wave before watching it break somewhere far from your feet. Jupiter spins. It spins faster than any other planet in the whole quiet family around the sun, a full day and night there. One entire turning of that vast globe takes only about 10 hours. Think of that against your own day, the long, unhurried arc from morning to evening to the bed you're lying in now. Jupiter folds that entire cycle into less time than a single night's sleep, spinning itself around and around, over and over, 10 hours at a time, tireless, patient, in its own relentless way. And a body that big, spinning that fast, cannot help but be shaped by its own motion. Picture spinning a ball of soft dough on your fingertip. The faster it turns, the more it wants to bulge outward at its middle and flatten at its top and bottom, flung gently outward along its widest part by its own hurry. That is Jupiter too. Not a perfect sphere, but very faintly, measurably squashed, wider through its middle than from pole to pole, a shape written into it by 10 straight hours of turning, over and over, for as long as it has existed. And that same spin does something else, something you can actually watch, something that becomes the whole reason storms live where they live out there. The fast turning drags the whole outer blanket of Jupiter's air along with it, stretching what might otherwise have been simple drifting clouds into long, taut, ribbon-straight bands that wrap the entire planet, cream and rust and pale gold, one behind another, layered like the grain in old wood, each one racing at its own speed, some pulled one way by the spin, others slipping back the other way beside them. The stripes you may have glimpsed in a photograph, that banded, weather-beaten face, that is 10 hours of turning, told over and over across billions of years, written directly into the air. So already, before a single storm has been named, before anything has been called dangerous, you can see where all of it will come from. Nothing here is a solid, standing threat, nothing with a floor to brace against and reach outward from. Everything that happens on Jupiter happens in air, in gas stretched thin at the top and crushed thick below, in bands dragged into motion by a spin 10 times faster than your own turning world, in a warmth left over from a fire that never lit. All its danger, every bit of it, begins as weather. Simply weather, on a scale too large for the word to feel adequate anymore. But weather all the same ordinary word you might use for rain against a window, only stretched across a body 11 Earths wide and given 120 years, or more, to build. And weather, however vast, is still only a shape moving through air, still something you can watch from very far away without it ever once knowing your shore exists. So let your eyes drift a little closer now, past the bands and their quiet racing, toward the one shape that has held longer than almost anything else moving up there, a single storm, older than your grandparents' grandparents, still turning, still safely, entirely out of reach. And if all its danger begins as weather, then there is one storm you should see first. Because it has been on watch longer than anyone alive, longer than anyone's grandparents, turning in the same patch of sky since before your country had its current name. You find it now, low in the southern part of that banded face, an oval the color of rust and clay, set into the pale cloud deck like a single eye that never quite closes. This is the great red spot, and the first thing worth knowing about it is its size, because numbers this large stop being numbers and start being something closer to a feeling, wider than your entire planet. A storm that could swallow Earth and still leave room at its rim for the weather to keep turning. You are looking at something that dwarfs every hurricane that has ever crossed an ocean here, every storm that has ever had a name and a warning attached to it. And it has been turning for a very long time. Astronomers have tracked it with confidence for at least 190 years, ever since telescopes grew sharp enough to hold a steady mark on it, and there is a longer, more uncertain thread of sightings, hints in old drawings and notebooks, that may push its true age past 3 centuries, which means this storm was already old when your great-great-great-grandparents were children. It was already turning through decade after decade of nights just like this one, patient in a way that has nothing to do with waiting for anything. Because a storm does not wait. It simply continues, fed by the deep heat and endless motion of a planet that never runs out of energy to spend. Its winds are almost hard to hold in the mind. At the outer edge, where the storm's rotation is fastest, gusts exceed 400 kilometers an hour, faster than almost anything that moves through the air where you live. A wall of wind that would flatten a forest, peel a roof from its rafters, silence a whole town. And yet, here is the strange, warm turn in the thought. You can let that fact sit in you without it touching you at all. Because there is no roof of yours anywhere near it, no forest of yours in its path, no shore of yours where that wind could ever make landfall. It rages entirely within itself, an ocean of gas circling an axis with no coastline for hundreds of millions of kilometers around, no ships, no towns, no one standing under it looking up in fear. It has raged like this since before anyone was born to be afraid of it. And it will likely rage on after you have lived a full, unhurried life and slept 10,000 nights more peaceful than this one. That is the particular comfort of a storm you watch from a shore it can never reach. Its violence is real. Its wind speeds are true. Its size is not exaggerated for effect. And none of that violence has a way of becoming your violence. You get to hold the whole ferocious fact of it in your open hand, weightless, because distance has already done the work of making it safe. Let your breath match that distance now. One long, easy inhale for every 1,000 kilometers you imagine between yourself and that turning rim, and feel how quickly the number outgrows the breath, how many inhales it would take before the storm's edge ever came close. It is worth noticing, too, that even a storm this old is not eternal, and there is something oddly settling in that as well. Across the decades that people have been measuring it carefully, the great red spot has been shrinking, slowly, unevenly, a long, slow exhale rather than any sudden collapse. A century and a half ago it stretched wider still, wide enough that 2 Earths might have fit across it side by side. Today, it has drawn in towards something closer to 1 Earth width, its outline growing rounder, less like the elongated eye of old drawings and more like a single deep breath held in place. No one is entirely certain where this slow contraction ends, whether it settles into some smaller, stable size or continues fading toward memory over centuries yet to come. But even the uncertainty, is a gentle kind of uncertainty, the kind that belongs to a clock too vast for anyone here to feel it ticking. You are not watching a storm that threatens to grow and reach you. You are watching one that, if anything, is easing, ever so gradually, toward its own quiet retirement, on a timescale that makes a single human lifetime feel like a single held breath of its own. There is a picture that might help you hold all of this at once, the way a picture sometimes settles a feeling faster than any fact can. Imagine standing on a shore at night, not a shore that exists anywhere in particular, just the idea of one. Sand still warm from a sun long since set, and far out past the last line of breakers, past the reach of any tide that could ever climb this beach, a storm is turning over open water. You can watch its lightning without flinching. You can watch the swell rise and fall without moving your feet. The waves it throws break somewhere else entirely, on some other shore that is not yours, over and over, and by the time anything about that storm could conceivably matter to you, it has already spent itself on distances too vast to carry. This is, almost exactly, what it means to look at the Great Red Spot from here. Its winds are the real winds, its centuries are the real centuries, its size is the true and staggering size, and every bit of it breaks against a shore hundreds of millions of kilometers from your own, again and again, in a place that was built, it seems, to hold exactly this kind of fury and let none of it go further. Think, for a moment, about what keeps a storm alive at all, here on the world you actually stand on. Down here, a hurricane crosses warm water, gathers itself into something fierce, and then meets land, hills, coastlines, whole continents of friction, and within days it is torn apart, unraveling into ordinary rain. Storms end because they run out of open water, because something solid finally gets in their way. The Great Red Spot has never once met anything solid. There is no coastline out there to drag against it, no mountain range to break its winds into smaller and smaller pieces, no rough, uneven ground to rob its energy the way land always eventually does. It spins above an ocean of gas that has no edges anywhere within reach, fed from below by a warmth that never quite turns off, and so, instead of days, instead of weeks, it has simply been allowed to keep going. One long, unbroken turn, decade folding into decade, century into century, with nothing out there ever telling it to stop. That is not menace. That is only what happens when a storm is given room enough and time enough, and never once told no. And you might notice, too, how differently that same fact would read if it were happening close to you, and how completely its meaning changes once you remember exactly how far away it is. A storm with nothing to weaken it, spinning for centuries without pause, would be a scientific worry indeed if it were centered anywhere over an ocean that touched a coast where people lived. But it is not centered anywhere near a coast at all. It is centered nowhere, floating within a body of gas that has no shore of its own, hundreds of millions of kilometers past the last shore that could ever belong to you. The very absence of land that lets this storm live forever is the same vast emptiness that keeps it forever out of reach. Its permanence and your safety, it turns out, come from exactly the same open distance. And the Great Red Spot, for all its fame, for all the drawings and photographs it has earned across nearly 2 centuries of careful watching, is really only the one storm that happened to grow large enough and last long enough for people down here to notice and name it first. It is not alone out there. It is not even unusual out there. Widen your gaze now, just slightly, away from that single rust-colored eye, and let it drift across the rest of that banded, breathing face. Because the whole visible surface of this planet, every cream-pale stripe and every dark, sunken band running alongside it is itself a kind of ocean. A striped and restless ocean of weather that never entirely settles, where storms far smaller than the great one are still born and still die by the thousands, drifting between the bands like slow, pale foam carried on currents too wide to see all at once. The Great Red Spot is simply the oldest wave in a sea that has never once gone still. The Great Red Spot does not sit alone in the dark. It rides inside something far larger, a whole ocean of weather that wraps the planet from pole to pole, and once your eyes have rested on that one deep red eye, they can widen now to take in the rest of the sea it drifts upon, which you are looking at. If you could hover above those clouds the way the ancients once imagined their king surveying a kingdom, is a planet dressed in stripes, bands of color running east to west, never north to south, each one a river of wind moving at a different speed than its neighbor. The whole globe combed into parallel currents, the way a tide leaves ripples in sand. These are the belts and the zones, and they have been there, in some form, for as long as anyone on your shore has owned a telescope to look. The pale ones are the zones, and they rise. Ammonia gas lifts from the deeper atmosphere, cools as it climbs, and freezes into fine crystals of ice, and those crystals catch the sunlight and throw it back as cream and ivory and the softest butter yellow, so that a zone reads to the eye as a raised, luminous road of cloud. Between them lie the belts, and they sink. Here the air is descending, the clouds are thinner, and you are seeing deeper into the planet, down to layers stained by chemistry we still only half understand. Ochres, rust, the brown of old tea, because sinking air is drier air, and drier air holds fewer of the bright ice crystals that make the zones glow. Rising and falling, pale and dark, one current pressed against the next. That is the whole architecture, an alternation as steady as breath. And where any two of these bands meet, moving in opposite directions, the friction between them spins up storms the way two currents meeting in open water twist into eddies. Watch it long enough, and the planet stops looking like a solid thing wearing stripes and starts looking like exactly what it is: motion. Layered on motion, going nowhere, going on forever. Scattered inside those belts are smaller storms, whole constellations of them, white ovals turning slowly enough that early telescope watchers could track them season after season, each one its own small hurricane, a fraction of the Great Red Spot's size, but no less real to anything unlucky enough to be caught inside it. And you can watch them do something almost tender for a thing born of such violence. They drift near one another, circle, and merge. Two ovals folding into one the way two drops of water on a window find each other and become a single, larger drop. It has happened within living memory, watched from your shore through nothing more than glass and patience. Three pale storms easing together into one, a slow marriage of wind. There is no danger in the watching. The distance does that work for you, the way it always has tonight. A storm the size of a small moon can spin itself into existence, swallow its neighbor, and spin on. And all of it reaches you only as a soft shifting of light on the far water, nothing more. Higher still, at the poles, the weather arranges itself into something almost too orderly to look like weather at all. When the spacecraft we sent out there, a patient, circling messenger you'll hear more of shortly, turned its cameras down at Jupiter's poles for the first time, it found not a single vast storm, but a ring of them. 8 cyclones at the North Pole and 5 at the South, each one hundreds of kilometers wide, arranged around a central storm like petals around the heart of a flower, spinning and spinning for years without drifting into one another, without merging, without breaking apart. No one entirely knows why they hold that shape, rather than collapsing together the way the white ovals do lower down. But there they turn, a crown of storms worn by a planet that has no one to see it but itself, and the spacecraft, and now you, resting on your far shore with the picture arriving gently into your mind. And here is the part worth lingering on, the part that explains everything else. These storms do not die. A hurricane on the world you call home is born over warm water, grows, and within weeks runs itself into a coastline, drags against hills and forests and the rough friction of solid ground, and loses its breath. It has somewhere to end. Jupiter offers its storms no such mercy, or such kindness, depending on how you choose to hear it, because Jupiter has no coastline at all, no continents to make landfall on, no mountains to catch on, no solid ground anywhere beneath those clouds to slow a wind down, only more atmosphere, layer under layer, softening but never stopping, all the way to depths where the very idea of ground stops making sense. A storm that begins there has nothing to drag against, and so it simply does not stop. The Great Red Spot has turned for at least 190 years that we have watched directly, and very likely for over 300, older than any building on your street, older than the nation you might call home, spinning quietly above a world with no shore of its own to wear it down. That is the real reason the storms of Jupiter feel eternal rather than merely large, not fury without end, but friction without a place to happen. Nothing there to interrupt the turning, just wind, and more wind beneath it, patient beyond any measure your body knows how to feel. You can rest in that fact, rather than fear it. A storm that cannot end is only frightening if it can reach you, and this one cannot. It has no shore-seeking instinct, no memory of you at all. Only the long, unhurried habit of turning above a world built with nothing to stop it. Let it turn. Let the belts slide past each other in their easy, endless bands, cream and rust, rising and falling, the white ovals drifting toward each other in their own slow time. None of it asks anything of you tonight. But it does leave a question hanging in the dark. The kind of question that follows you the way a held breath follows a long dive. All of this, the stripes, the ovals, the crowns of cyclones at the poles, is happening on the outside, in the topmost skin of clouds that our eyes and our cameras can actually touch with light. And light, on Jupiter, does not go very far. A few dozen kilometers down, and the sun's reach gives out entirely, swallowed by haze and pressure, and the belts and zones you've been picturing simply stop being visible, stop being anything a telescope could ever show you. So the storm goes on, somewhere beneath that ceiling of cloud, in the dark, unlit, unseen. And the question that carries you forward now, easily, the way a current carries a boat that has stopped rowing, is simple enough to rest your mind on as you drift what is happening down there, in that place where no light goes at all. And beneath those endless bands, beneath the white ovals drifting past each other like slow ships that never quite collide, there is a place light does not reach, and it is there that the weather finishes what it started. You do not have to follow it down. You can stay exactly where you are, on your far shore, eyes half closed, while the story goes on without you needing to move a single muscle. Deep in Jupiter's clouds, lightning happens too, though it is not lightning as you have known it on ordinary summer nights. These are superbolts, flashes so much brighter than anything born in an Earth sky that when spacecraft first measured them, the numbers seemed almost too large to believe, hundreds of times more energetic than the kind that flickers over a quiet field back home. And yet, they are shallow, most of them, born not in the deep unseen furnace, but in the upper layers, in clouds of ammonia and water mixed together like a strange skyborne slush, a place where the ordinary rules of storms still apply, just turned up louder, turned up brighter. On a planet that does everything at a larger scale than we were built to expect. Picture it as you might picture heat lightning far off over a lake, a flicker without a sound, a brightness that announces itself and then is gone, except that here, the lake is a planet, and the flicker could swallow a continent and never notice. Around and beneath those flashes, something almost tender happens, though it comes from cold rather than warmth. Ammonia and water, colliding high in the atmosphere, begin to freeze into something scientists have taken to calling mushballs, soft, slushy hailstones, half ice and half liquid at their core, growing heavier as they fall, sinking through layer after layer of Jupiter's thick and restless air. They do not fall the way hail falls here, hard and sudden and over in a moment. They drift downward for what may be very long stretches of Jovian time, carrying ammonia out of the upper clouds and down toward warmer depths, where they finally melt and vanish, recycling the very chemistry that helped make the lightning in the first place. It is strange to think of hail as unhurried, as almost patient, but on a planet with no ground to strike, no roof to drum against, that is exactly what it becomes. Falling not toward anything, simply falling, deeper into a place with no floor at all. Try to hold that image a moment, because it is one of the more unexpected pictures this planet offers. Somewhere above you, tucked into memory now rather than sky, a whole ocean of these small, soft stones is sifting downward in perpetual, unwitnessed motion, thousands of kilometers of open air between one layer of cloud and the next, no wind shear to shatter them. No ground to end their journey abruptly. They simply travel, for what would be, by our clocks, an astonishingly long while, until warmth finally claims them and they melt back into vapor and start the whole slow cycle again. It is weather with no season to interrupt it, no year to close it out. A kind of engine that has been quietly turning since long before anyone on your shore first lifted a telescope toward this light. That absence of a floor is the heart of what makes the region beneath the clouds so unlike anywhere a body could stand. There is no bottom to arrive at, only pressure that keeps building, only heat that keeps rising to meet whatever comes down to greet it. And this is the part of tonight's story where one traveler did go there, not because it was safe, but because someone needed to know what was on the other side of the clouds, and it could not be learned from the shore alone. In December of 1995, after a journey that had lasted years, a small metal probe separated from the Galileo spacecraft and began its fall into Jupiter's atmosphere. It had no engines to slow it further, no plan to return. Its work was to fall and to speak while it fell, and it did both with a kind of quiet devotion that is easy to overlook in a spreadsheet of scientific instruments, but is, if you let yourself feel it, rather moving. It had a heat shield built thick enough to survive a plunge hotter than the surface of the sun for the first few searing minutes, tearing through the upper haze at extraordinary speed, glowing, shedding material by design, giving itself up layer by layer so that what remained underneath could keep listening, keep measuring, keep sending its findings home across hundreds of millions of kilometers to instruments waiting patiently on our shore. And for 58 minutes, it did exactly that. It measured winds stronger than almost anything recorded on Earth, howling and constant. with none of the surface friction that would have slowed them in a world with mountains or oceans to drag against. It measured lightning, confirming what telescopes had only guessed at from a comfortable distance. It sampled the very ammonia clouds we have been imagining, the very chemistry that builds those slow sinking hailstones, and it sent back numbers on helium, on hydrogen, on the deep composition of a world that had kept its recipe mostly secret until that hour. It found the air drier in places than anyone expected, and windier at depth than anyone expected too. Small surprises that reshaped, in an unhurried way, everything scientists thought they understood about how such a world breathes. 58 minutes is not very long. It is shorter than the time you have already spent tonight letting your shoulders soften into whatever is holding you. But within that short span, the probe told us more about the true nature of that atmosphere than centuries of looking upward ever could. Because for once, something was not watching from the shore. Something had waded out into the water itself. It could not have lasted. Even as it transmitted, the pressure around it was climbing past anything built by human hands to survive indefinitely, and the heat was rising with it, and somewhere below the last depth it reported from, the probe's signal simply stopped. Not with violence, not with alarm, simply an ending. The way a voice on a phone call fades when the connection finally gives out mid-sentence, without drama. Because the distance and the depth had finally become too much even for something so carefully built. Engineers on the shore back then believe it was crushed first, and then very quickly melted, its metal returning to something closer to gas than solid, dissolving into the same thick atmosphere it had spent its last hour describing to us. It became, in a very real sense, a small and willing part of the planet it had come so far to understand, its instruments still open, still listening. Right up until the pressure closed over them, the way water closes over a stone dropped from a bridge, a small disturbance on the surface. And then, only depth. No one on the shore that night heard anything dramatic either. There was no cry, no final alarm bell in a control room. There was simply a graph on a screen that stopped climbing, a number that stopped arriving, and a room full of quiet people who understood, without needing to be told twice, exactly what that silence meant. They had known, from the very design of the mission, that this was always how the story would end. Not a rescue, not a return, but a single long breath outward, and then stillness. And somehow that made it easier to carry, the way it is easier to carry any goodbye you saw coming from a great distance, with time enough to be grateful before it arrived. There is something almost restful in that ending, if you let it sit with you the way a low hum sits under a familiar song. The probe did not die of danger the way we usually imagine danger. No jagged edge, no sudden shock, no fear in the ordinary sense, because it had left fear behind on the shore along with everyone who built it. It simply went as far as a machine could go, gave everything it had time to give, and then became still, absorbed into the very storm it had gone to measure. And because it went, you do not have to. Because it waded out into water none of us could survive, you are permitted to lie here in the dark, weightless in your own bed, and simply receive the story secondhand, softened by all those safe kilometers of distance, carried to you the way a message is carried by someone who loved the truth enough to deliver it themselves. Everything the probe touched, everything it measured in its last hour, lived in the part of Jupiter we can name and describe: the wind, the lightning, the drifting hail, the pressure, the heat. These are dangers with a shape, dangers you can draw, Dangers a spacecraft can be built to survive for 58 minutes, and then honestly cannot survive any longer. But there is another kind of danger around this planet that has no cloud to hide in and no storm to announce it. A danger with no visible edge at all, invisible even to a probe with open eyes, stretching outward from Jupiter in silence, far beyond where any lightning flickers, far beyond where any hailstone falls, a tide you cannot see. Moving all around this giant world long before you ever notice it is there. That messenger's fall settles into stillness now, its last signal folded away like a lantern lowered gently out of sight, and here on your safe shore nothing else has to fall to be near you. Something else is arriving instead, not a probe, not a plunge, but a tide. Let your shoulders sink a little further into whatever is holding you tonight. The mattress beneath your back, the blanket over your arms, and notice how it holds you without asking anything of you in return. That is the feeling to carry into this next stretch of dark, because far out past the storms and the belts and the crushed and faithful probe, Jupiter is doing something that has nothing to do with clouds at all. It is breathing outward. Not air, the planet has none to spare for that, but magnetism, an invisible field spun up out of a heart of metallic hydrogen turning 10 hours a day, fast enough and deep enough to weave a bubble around itself that swallows moons, swallows distance, swallows the dark between them. They call it a magnetosphere, though the word is far too small and clinical for what it actually is. It is the largest coherent structure in the whole solar system, larger by far than the planet it surrounds, larger than the sun. If your eyes could somehow see magnetic fields the way they see light, this bubble would rise into the night sky bigger than the full moon ever looks from where you lie right now, close enough to feel improbable, close enough to fill a whole corner of the dark with its slow, silent shape. And it does not end where the planet ends. It stretches backward from the sunlight, trailing away into a long invisible tail that drifts past the orbit of Saturn, one world's shadow reaching out to brush against the doorstep of another. You do not need to picture the edges of it precisely. Let it stay soft at the boundaries, the way distant things do in dreams, enormous, certain, and blurred. Picture yourself, for a while, not standing anywhere at all. Picture yourself afloat, not falling, the way the little probe once fell, but held, the way you are held right now by whatever is beneath you, buoyant, weightless, unhurried. Imagine drifting into the outer skin of that great invisible bubble, not because you sought it out, but because it simply reached far enough to find you, the way a tide reaches a swimmer without the swimmer having to swim toward it. There is no current here that pulls. There is only a current that carries. You do not paddle. You do not steer. You simply rest on it, and it moves you, patient and enormous, the way a mattress moves with you when you turn in your sleep without waking. This is what a field line feels like. If a field line could be felt, not a rope, not a wall, but a long invisible thread looping out from one pole of the planet and back down into the other, thousands upon thousands of these threads laid side by side, curved like the ribs of something vast and breathing. You are lying across them now, weightless, the way a leaf lies across the surface of still water, without sinking, without struggling, simply resting on a tension it does not have to understand. Somewhere far beneath you the storms keep turning, the red spot keeps its centuries-long watch. The belts keep sliding past each other in their patient stripes, but none of that reaches you here. Up here there is only the drift, and the faint, low hum of something enormous moving in its own unhurried rhythm. A hum you feel more than hear. The way you might feel the engine of a ship far below deck while you lie in a warm bunk above it, rocked without effort, carried without cost. There is no sense of up or down out here, no true horizon to measure yourself against, only the looping curve of the field lines stretching away in every direction until they blur into the same soft dark the rest of the sky is made of. If you tried to trace a single thread all the way from one pole to the other, your attention would grow tired long before the thread did. It would keep going, unhurried, past the point where thinking about it comfortably makes sense, back down into the clouds at the far pole, the way a wave finally folds back into the sea it came from. You do not have to trace it. You only have to notice that you are somewhere along its curve, held loosely in the middle of that long, patient arc, rocked exactly the way something is rocked, when nothing beneath it has any interest in dropping it. Notice how different this floating feels from anything you might have expected of a giant planet's shadow. There is no weight to it, no pressure, none of the crushing hand that closed slowly around that small brave probe on its way down through the clouds. That was a story of falling inward, toward the heat and the density, and the place where light itself finally gave out. This is a story of floating outward, along threads so wide-spun and so far from the fire beneath them that they carry almost nothing of the planet's danger at all, only its reach, only its patient, encompassing shape. A tide does not need to be gentle to be safe to float on. It only needs you to be far enough out on it, riding the surface rather than searching for the bottom. That is where you are tonight, on the surface of something immense, never once asked to touch what lies beneath. Let yourself stay in that floating a while longer. There is nowhere you need to be inside it. The tide that holds you is not asking you to do anything but continue existing, loosely, the way you are already doing right now in your own bed, on your own safe shore. At this hour, when the whole idea of effort has quietly excused itself from the room, somewhere out along those looping threads, so far from you that the distance itself becomes a kind of lullaby, tiny fragments of matter are being carried too, smaller than dust, faster than thought, swept up long ago and never let go, spinning around and around the great magnetic loops the way you might spin, drowsily, at the edge of sleep, caught in a slow orbit between waking and not. You cannot see them from here. You are not meant to. Tonight they are only a distant hush at the edge of the current, a faraway detail in an ocean too big to take in all at once, and that is exactly where they should stay, far, faint, and none of your concern. Because this is the strange, comforting shape of the whole night's lesson, arriving early. In the middle of the drift, the biggest things are so often the tenderest to simply lie beside. A structure larger than a star, wrapped around a planet made of storm and pressure and heat, and here you are, floating across the very edge of it, and nothing about the crossing asks anything of your body at all. The size of it is not a threat from where you're lying. The size of it is almost a kindness, an enormous, unhurried thing, taking up so much room in the dark that there is, by simple arithmetic, less room left over for anything to trouble you. You are small against it, and smallness, out here on the tide, does not feel like danger. It feels like being tucked into a fold of something too vast to notice you, which is its own particular kind of safety. Think, too, of how far this carrying reaches if you let the thought drift rather than chase it. That long tail trailing past Saturn's orbit means the tide you are resting on tonight is already touching neighborhoods of the solar system you have not even arrived at yet in this story, brushing lightly past worlds and empty distances alike, indifferent to what it passes, faithful only to its own looping shape. You do not have to follow it that far. You are allowed to let your attention stay close, right here at the near edge of the bubble, drifting in place while the rest of that vast tail goes on, unraveling into the dark without you. Doing whatever it does, out past the reach of tonight's small, unhurried thoughts. Let the drift begin to loosen now, the way sleep loosens its grip on a held breath. The current that carried you starts to ease back, the hum growing fainter, the long looping threads receding the way a shoreline recedes when a boat turns for home. You come back to the shape of your own bed, your own weight settled where it always was, the tide still turning somewhere out there without you, patient, indifferent, enormous. And that is fine, because it was never yours to keep. It leaves behind only one small, unfinished thread of thought, the kind that lingers pleasantly at the edge of consciousness rather than tugging you fully awake. Those tiny fragments you drifted past without quite seeing, caught forever in their looping orbits, spinning close to the storms and the moons and the endless turning clouds. What were they, exactly? And why does something so small, out there in that beautiful invisible ocean, turn out to be the one thing in this whole vast floating structure that no shore, however safe, would ever want to touch? Those trapped particles you have been drifting past, the hum you rode without effort along the invisible current, have a name now and a temperament. They are radiation, wound so tightly around Jupiter's magnetic field that near the moon Io, where the belt runs thickest, a body without shelter would receive a lethal dose in a matter of minutes. Say that number to yourself once, plainly, the way you would name a distant weather system on the evening news, and then let it settle back into the dark where it belongs, because it belongs to a place your body will never visit. This is the sharpest tooth this giant carries, an unseen bite in an unseen ocean, and it lives entirely on the far side of the water from you. Engineers on this shore have spent decades learning to send messengers out into that bite without losing them. Juno, the spacecraft that has been circling Jupiter since 2016, keeps its most delicate instruments inside a vault of titanium roughly the size of a garden shed, walls half a centimeter thick, built not to keep anything out so much as to slow down what gets in, to buy the electronics a little more time before the particles do their patient, corrosive work. Even wrapped in metal, Juno cannot simply sit and stare the way a lighthouse keeper might. It flies long, elliptical polar loops instead, diving close over the poles where the field lines gather and the radiation is fierce, then swinging far out and away where the belt thins to almost nothing, granting its instruments a kind of breathing room, a recovery lap, before the next close pass. Each loop is a held breath taken on our behalf. It is a daring shape of orbit, chosen precisely because the alternative, lingering low, tracing slow circles near the equator where the worst of the belt pools, would cook the spacecraft's mind within a single year. Europa Clipper, the newer mission bound for the icy moon that may hide an ocean under its shell, takes the same lesson and applies it even more cautiously. Rather than settle into orbit around Jupiter itself, where the daily exposure would be relentless, it will loop instead around Jupiter at a wider, gentler distance, and simply dip inward for each flyby of Europa. A brief visit. A quick reading of the ice and the tug of gravity beneath it, and then a retreat back out to where the particles are sparse and the instruments can rest. Dozens of these dips are planned across the mission's life, each one a small, deliberate errand run into weather no living thing could survive, timed and shaped so that the errand ends before any real harm is done. Think of it the way you might think of wading only ankle deep into cold surf and stepping back before the chill reaches your knees. Not fear, just good sense. The same good sense that lets you stand comfortably on this shore tonight, while a spacecraft, on our behalf, keeps its ankles wet a little longer than yours ever will. Notice what both spacecraft have in common: Juno with its titanium vault and its long looping breaths, Europa Clipper with its brief dips and its patient retreats. Neither one tries to defeat the belt. Neither one imagines it can sit inside that ocean of particles and simply endure. Instead, each mission is built around timing, around knowing precisely how long a visit can last before it costs too much, and then honoring that limit without argument. There is something almost restful in that design, if you think about it. An entire engineering philosophy built not on bravery, but on respect for a boundary. On the plain acceptance that some water is not for swimming, only for watching. And that watching well is its own kind of courage. The scientists who plotted these orbits were, in their own careful way, choosing the same shore you are choosing now, only drawing their line a few hundred kilometers closer to the waves. And radiation is only one of the two sharp teeth. The other is simpler, older, written into the giant's mass rather than its magnetism, gravity itself. Pulling at roughly 2.5 times the strength you feel here, pressing down on the tops of those endless clouds. It is not a monstrous number, not some impossible crushing force. You could still stand, still walk, if there were anything solid to stand on, which of course there is not, since Jupiter offers no floor, only deeper and deeper cloud and pressure. But that pull, ordinary as it sounds, becomes something else entirely when you point it at a small neighboring moon instead of at empty cloud tops. That is where the second story of this movement begins, in the close, tireless embrace between Jupiter and little Io. Io orbits nearer to Jupiter than our own moon orbits us, caught between the giant's steady pull and the rhythmic tugging of its two neighboring moons, Europa and Ganymede, whose orbits are timed so precisely against Io's own that the three of them fall into a kind of orbital dance, a repeating pattern that never lets Io's path settle into a perfect, restful circle. Instead, its orbit is stretched, ever so slightly elliptical, which means that with every lap, Io moves a little closer to Jupiter and then a little farther, and with every change in distance, the strength of that gravitational pull changes too. The moon's rocky body is squeezed and released, over and over, hundreds of times each Earth year, a kneading that never stops long enough for Io to cool or to rest. Flex a piece of metal back and forth in your hands long enough, and you will feel it grow warm under your fingers. Io undergoes that same flexing on a planetary scale, its interior warmed not by any inner fire of its own making, but by the sheer patient insistence of being pulled first one way and then another, forever, by a neighbor far larger than itself. The result is a moon that has become the most volcanically active body known to us anywhere, more restless than Earth, more restless than any world we have found, its surface constantly resurfaced by lava, plumes of sulfur rising 100 kilometers or more into a thin sky, its colors shifting across the years in mottled yellows and reds, like a body that never finishes healing, because it is, never asked to stop moving. Where our own world carries its inner heat mostly as a memory, left over from its birth and slowly leaking away through billions of patient years, Io's heat is renewed fresh with every single orbit, paid to it again and again by the same tireless hand that pulls it close and lets it go, close and lets it go. A rhythm as steady as a tide with no ebb, only endless, low return. It is a strange kind of restlessness to hold in your mind at this hour, but notice how it too dissolves into distance the moment you let it. Io's fire is not a fire near you. It is a fire kept lit by a gravity you can feel only as a gentle, ordinary weight beneath your own blanket. A fire tended by forces that have nothing to do with the shore where you are lying, breathing slowly, perfectly still. You do not need to picture the lava itself, only the fact of it, small and far away and cared for by no one, burning on in the dark the way distant lighthouses burn on without needing you to watch them. This is the shape all of tonight's sharpest facts keep taking. If you let them, radiation belts fierce enough to end a life in minutes. And they are the reason a spacecraft wears titanium and flies careful looping paths. A gravity strong enough to knead a moon until it glows, and it is a gravity that never once reaches this shore, that has no more claim on you than the gravity of a wave has on a house built well above the tide line. These are facts about over there. They are true, and they are enormous, and none of them are asking anything of you tonight. You get to hold them the way you might hold a photograph of a wildfire on some other continent, moved by the scale of it, untouched by the heat of it, free to feel the awe without the danger, because the danger was never traveling toward you in the first place. And once you have let both of those teeth recede back into the dark water where they live, the unseen radiation, the unseen kneading of gravity, there is a gentler question left to ask about this giant, one with nothing sharp in it at all. It is simply a question of size. Because a world large enough to squeeze a moon into fire, large enough to grow a magnetic bubble that stretches past the orbit of the next planet out, is large enough that its very bigness starts to mean something different than danger. It starts to mean scale for its own sake, room enough to hold more than 1,000 Earths inside it, mass enough to outweigh every other planet in this solar system, combined many times over. And it is toward that scale, that quiet arithmetic of vastness, that your attention drifts next, out past the last of the sharp edges and into something closer to comfort. That little moon, squeezed and released, until its own insides find no choice but to spill upward as fire. Hold that picture a moment longer, because it is about to shrink. Not the volcano. You let Io drift back into the dark where it belongs, one small stone caught in a much larger grip, and let your attention widen. The way your breath widens when a room finally goes quiet enough to notice its own size. Because everything you have been told tonight, the lightning, the crushing air, the radiation no metal can fully outrun, all of it happens inside something so vast that the numbers themselves start to feel less like facts and more like a lullaby of scale. A rhythm your mind can rock inside instead of measure. Picture Earth as a single marble. Now picture the bowl that would hold it. Jupiter is that bowl, and it is generous enough to hold more than 1,300 marbles like ours inside its curve, with room left to spare, room enough that our whole rocky, watery, breathing world would rattle around in there like a pebble in a much older, much quieter jar. 1,300 Earths, not stacked, not squeezed, simply contained, the way a single held breath can contain a whole unspoken sentence. Imagine every ocean you have ever swum in, every mountain range you have ever driven past, every city that has ever kept you awake with its light, all of it folded down to the size of one marble among 1,300 others, rolling loose in a bowl too wide for the eye to take in from any single angle. That is the scale you are resting beneath tonight, whether or not you can see it through the ceiling above your bed. And yet Jupiter's own mass, when you weigh the whole planet rather than measure its emptied volume, comes to about 318 Earths. Say that gap out loud to yourself, slowly, and let it settle. Room for 1,300, weight of only 318. Which means most of what Jupiter is air, sky, gas so light and so endless that it fills a bowl of that size and still leaves it feeling, at the edges, almost hollow. The way a great tent of pale fabric can billow across an entire field and still weigh almost nothing in your two hands. Everything you pictured earlier tonight, the cream-colored zones, the darker belts, the one red storm wider than our whole planet, floats on the very outer skin of this bowl, a mist gathered at the rim of something far deeper than any cloud could ever reach. But sky this deep cannot stay sky forever. Somewhere beneath those familiar cream and rust-colored bands you have already pictured, the ones streaming past like slow, silent scarves, the air stops behaving like air at all. The weight of everything above begins to press down, layer upon layer, thousands of kilometers of atmosphere leaning its whole, gathered self onto the atmosphere below it. And hydrogen gas, the lightest thing there is, the same breath that fills a balloon, is squeezed until it forgets it is a gas. It becomes something closer to a sea, an ocean without a name we use on our own shore, liquid metallic hydrogen, under pressures that reach into the millions of atmospheres, pressures with no simple comparison, pressures that would fold steel the way your own hand folds a page of paper before you set it down for the night. In this ocean, hydrogen conducts the way metal conducts, and that vast hidden current is what spins the magnetic bubble you drifted through only a little while ago, the one that reached out past Saturn's own orbit without ever once needing to touch you. There is no surface down there to catch you, no shoreline where the ocean ends and solid ground begins. The hydrogen simply keeps changing. The way a single note held long enough starts to sound like a different instrument entirely, gas thickening into something like fog, fog thickening into something like syrup, syrup finally forced into a metal-bright sea that carries electricity the way our own oceans carry currents of warm and cold water, circling, endless, entirely without a coastline to interrupt it. Explorers of any kind, real or imagined, could descend for days through that transition and never once feel a floor arrive beneath their feet. There would only be more depth, and more weight, and more silence. And beneath even that ocean, deeper than any beam of sunlight could ever wander, waits a core. Small, by Jupiter's own standards, perhaps only a handful of Earth's worth of rock and metal and ice at its very center, but hot. Hotter, by most measure, than the visible face of our own sun, a furnace with nowhere to shine, sealed under so many layers of crushed sky that its light never reaches the clouds above it, its heat instead leaking outward slowly, over billions of years, warming the whole planet very faintly from within, so that even now, tonight, Jupiter gives off more heat than it receives from the sun it circles. It is, in its own buried way, still cooling from its birth, patiently remembering the fire it never quite became. Sit with that whole architecture for a moment, the bowl wide enough for 1,300 worlds, the crushed ocean with no shore of its own, the hidden furnace older than any storm on its surface, and notice what happens to the fear you might have expected to feel. It doesn't grow. it loosens. Because there is a particular kind of relief that arrives only when something is undeniably, inarguably larger than you, larger than your problems, larger than the version of tonight you carried in with you when you lay down. Against a giant like this, your own smallness stops being a wound and becomes instead a kind of permission. You are not the one holding any of it. You were never meant to be. Think for a moment of how much effort it usually takes to feel this unburdened. How many nights you have lain here trying to talk yourself down from the size of your own day, reasoning with worries that refuse to shrink no matter how patiently you explain their proportions to yourself. Jupiter does that work for you without asking, without even knowing you exist. It simply is so much larger than anything you carry that the comparison itself becomes the medicine. You don't have to convince yourself that your worries are small. Beside 318 Earths worth of planet, beside an ocean under millions of atmospheres, beside a core outshining the surface of a star, they already are. Let that thought move through you the way warmth moves through a blanket that has finally caught your own temperature. Being small, on a night like this, does not mean being unprotected. It means being held. It means the weight of an entire storming world, an ocean under millions of atmospheres, a core hotter than a star's own skin, belongs entirely to Jupiter, and to the far black distance it turns in, and not 1 gram of it belongs to you. Nothing tonight is yours to carry. Not the pressure, not the heat, not even the worry that sometimes likes to dress itself up as responsibility and climb into bed beside you uninvited. You can set all of that down here, on this quiet shore, because the shore was built for setting things down. The giant does the storming so that you don't have to. That has always been the arrangement, whether you noticed it before tonight or not. One world doing all the churning, far out past the edge of safety, so that a much smaller world, your world, gets to lie unhurried and simply watch the light of it arrive, already gentled by distance, into something you can rest inside, a lingering glow instead of a blow. And here is the strange, soft turn worth carrying with you as your eyes grow heavier. The very size that makes Jupiter so overwhelming, so crushing, so entirely unsurvivable up close, may be a large part of why your own shore has stayed so calm for so long. A planet that can swallow 1,300 Earths in volume does not simply sit in the dark being enormous for no reason. It reaches. It pulls. Its gravity leans on everything nearby, shepherding, gathering, occasionally absorbing, and somewhere in that leaning, long before you were born, before the first unhurried watcher ever looked up and wondered what that steady wandering light might be, this same giant may have already stood watch over the little rock you're lying on now, catching in its own enormous arms the kind of blow your small shore was never built to survive on its own. The storm you have been watching all night, from this safe and steady distance, may in fact be one of the reasons the distance has stayed safe at all. A shore kept dry, not despite the giant, but partly because of it. A debt owed to the very thing you were taught to fear. And there is one more turn to take before you let that hugeness settle into simple comfort. One more thing this giant has done that reaches all the way down to you, tonight, breathing easily under a roof it will never touch. Because a planet this large does not only sit in the dark being enormous, it moves things. It catches things, sometimes in its own rough way. It keeps things from ever arriving at your door. Picture July of 1994, a year that already lives in the deep past now, folded away like every other year eventually is. A comet named Shoemaker, Levy 9, had wandered too close to Jupiter once before, and the planet's pull had already done what that pull does to anything that strays within its reach. It took the comet's fragile body and pulled it apart. Not violently, in the way a collision is violent, more the way a thread pulled at both ends by hands of very different strength simply comes undone. By the time astronomers found it, the comet was no longer one object. It was a broken chain of 21 pieces, strung out across the sky like beads slipping from a string, each one still falling, unable to do anything but fall toward the planet that had already claimed it. For 6 days that July, one piece after another struck. Not on us. Not anywhere near us, on Jupiter, far out past the asteroids, past the reach of anything that could ever cross the intervening dark and find you here. Each fragment fell at more than 200,000 kilometers an hour, and each one arrived on schedule, almost gently, the way a series of stones dropped one after another into the same pond will fall in their own unhurried rhythm, even while the pond itself churns. Each impact bloomed into a dark bruise in the cloud tops, and some of those bruises, when the smoke of them cleared, were wider than the whole Earth. Scars you could have laid our entire world across and still had room at the edges. Telescopes everywhere on this side of the sky turned to watch. Observatories that had never once trained their lenses on the same target for 6 straight days. And what they watched was not a threat. It was a demonstration. 21 blows, some carrying more force than every nuclear weapon ever built by every hand that ever built one, combined many times over, and not one of them reached the shore. The storm took the hit. The harbor never even felt the water move. It is easy, thinking about it now, to imagine the fear that might have gathered if that comet's path had been drawn only slightly differently. If the arithmetic of orbits had pointed those 21 falling stones somewhere closer to home. But that is not the story that happened, and dwelling on the story that did not happen is its own kind of restlessness. The mind rehearsing a wave that never broke. What happened instead is simpler and, in its way, far more useful to carry into sleep. The comet found the largest available target in the whole neighborhood, and the largest available target absorbed it completely, the way a very deep lake absorbs a stone thrown from its own shore, without so much as a ripple reaching the far bank. This is the part of the story that turns the whole question of the title a little sideways, and it is worth letting that turn happen slowly in your mind, the way a boat turns slowly when the tide beneath it changes direction without any wind at all. Because Jupiter does this more than once. It does something like this quietly, patiently, across the whole history of the solar system, in ways too vast and too unhurried for any single telescope to have caught in one sitting. Out along Jupiter's own orbital path, far ahead of it and far behind it, there travel 2 loose swarms of asteroids called the Trojans. Thousands of them, held in place not by any leash or wall, but by the balance of forces at 2 particular points where Jupiter's gravity and the Sun's gravity settle into a kind of truce. Jupiter shepherds them the way a low hillside shepherds fog, not by chasing it, not by touching it at all, just by being massive enough, patient enough, that the fog has nowhere else to gather. Those asteroids have ridden along in that gentle formation for billions of years, kept in their lane by a gravity that never once has to reach out and grab them. They simply have nowhere else to be. And further out, in the cold reaches where comets sleep for millennia before some faint nudge sends them falling sunward, Jupiter's gravity waits like a low wall along a very long road. Long-period comets, wanderers on orbits that might otherwise carry them straight down into the inner solar system, tend to pass near that wall on their way in. Some are deflected there, tipped just enough off course that they miss us by a wide margin. Some are captured outright, drawn into Jupiter's own gravity and either flung into new, harmless orbits or absorbed the way Shoemaker, Levy 9 was absorbed. One quiet fall into a cloud deck so deep it swallows the evidence within hours. It is tempting, lying here in the dark, to make this into a tidy story. The great protector planet, standing guard so that we might sleep. And there is real truth folded into that image. But it is only fair, and somehow more restful still, to tell you the truth plainly rather than to varnish it. Astronomers do not agree on how much of a guardian Jupiter really is. For every comet its gravity turns aside, its gravity can just as easily nudge another one loose from a stable orbit and send it inward for the first time, a wall that occasionally opens a gate rather than closing one. The shepherd's dog, it turns out, sometimes startles the flock as often as it gathers it. Nobody watching from this shore has ever needed Jupiter to be a perfect guardian. It only had to be there, doing what its enormous mass does simply by existing, tipping the odds in ways too vast and too old to fully unravel in one human lifetime, let alone one drowsy night. So let this be the answer that finally settles the whole question the title first raised, back when Jupiter was just a bright light climbing over the water. How can a planet be dangerous? It can be dangerous the way a breakwater is dangerous. A great gray wall of stone standing out past the harbor mouth, built to take the sea's full anger onto itself so that the boats tied up behind it never have to. Stand close to a breakwater in a storm, and you would feel its danger fully. The spray thrown 30 feet into the air, the boom of each wave breaking against stone that does not move. But you are not standing on the breakwater. You are behind it, in the calm water, where the same storm that would break a small boat apart out at sea arrives only as a low murmur and a gentle rocking, the water almost still, almost glassy, because something enormous out at the edge of things is doing all the taking of blows so that you do not have to. Jupiter's lightning, its crushing pressures, its lethal tides of radiation, its comet-shattering pull. Every fearsome fact from every movement of this long night was never a fact about your safety. It was always a fact about the wall. The most dangerous planet in this solar system turns out to be dangerous in almost exactly the shape of something that keeps you safe, enormous, distant, absorbing violence on a scale built for it, so that the shore where you are lying now stays unremarkable, undisturbed, precisely the kind of place where nothing ever happens and nothing needs to. And it is worth pausing, before the night moves on, over the strange tenderness of that fact. All this, the storms wider than continents, the radiation belts, the 24 scars stamped into a planet's clouds by a comet's last 21 heartbeats, the slow eternal shepherding of rubble and ice across billions of years, all of it was learned. Somebody had to notice it. Somebody had to be looking up at exactly the right moment, or building exactly the right lens, or timing exactly the right shadow, crossing exactly the right small moon, and write it down so that it could travel all this distance and arrive, so many years later, as nothing more alarming than a bedtime thought. None of the people who first found these things stood any closer to Jupiter than you are right now. They watched from this same safe shore, patient and quiet in their own way, and what they saw did not come to them all at once. It came slowly, across centuries, the way any true thing about the vast dark eventually does. One careful watcher at a time, one small lens at a time, one long night of looking spent, so that, Generations later, someone lying comfortably in the dark could simply be told the answer and let it carry them the rest of the way towards sleep. And if the giant has spent all these centuries taking the sea's anger so that our small harbor could stay unhurried, then it is worth asking how anyone on this shore ever came to know that at all. Because nobody sailed out to check. Nobody had to. Every fact you have been carrying tonight, the storm wider than Earth, the invisible tide that catches and holds, the radiation belts, the 21 bruises left by a comet that never reached us, every one of these was gathered by people who stayed exactly where you are now, on solid ground, in the dark, simply looking up. Picture the shore 3.5 centuries further back. A man in Padua, in January of 1610, points a spyglass of his own grinding toward that steady wandering light the ancients had already named for their king. He expects a single point. What he finds instead are 3 small stars in a tidy line beside it, and the following night, without explanation, they have moved. A third night, a fourth, he keeps a careful log, sketching their positions the way you might trace a familiar shape with a fingertip, in the dark, unhurried, patient, returning to the same window each evening because something in the pattern refuses to sit still. Within a week, a fourth light joins the other 3, and slowly the truth settles over him the way warmth settles into a blanket. These are not fixed stars caught near Jupiter by coincidence. They are moons. They circle the planet the way the planet circles the sun. For the first time, someone has watched, with human eyes, proof that not everything in the sky turns around us. The center of things quietly shifts, and the universe grows larger and gentler at once. Because if worlds can orbit worlds out there, then perhaps our own small orbit is nothing to fear either, just one more shore among many, held in its place by the same soft mathematics. Notice what kind of discovery this was. Not a journey. Not a risk. A man stayed on his rooftop, wrapped against the night air, and simply refused to look away from something ordinary until it revealed itself as extraordinary. That is the whole method, really, and it is the same method that will carry through every messenger still to come tonight. Not daring, but attention. Not speed, but the willingness to keep watching one thing for long enough that it finally tells you what it is. Word of what Galileo had seen spread slowly across Europe, letter by careful letter, astronomer after astronomer lifting their own glass toward the same point of light to check the claim for themselves, until the 4 small companions had names of their own and a place in the sky that no one could unsee again. Those 4 lights Galileo found, the ones you might imagine now as faint companions strung beside the planet's glow, became, in time, a kind of clock. Nearly 70 years later, an astronomer named Ole Armer sat with years of careful timings of one of those moons, Io, watching it slip into Jupiter's shadow and reappear, eclipse after eclipse, the way a lighthouse might blink on some far coastline. He noticed something strange. The eclipses ran early when Earth was nearer to Jupiter in its own orbit, and late when Earth had swung around to the far side of the sun. The moon itself was not misbehaving. The light carrying the news of its disappearance simply took longer to cross the wider gap. In that single quiet observation, made from a rooftop with nothing but a telescope and a patient logbook, Armour discovered that light itself has a speed, that even a beam crossing the dark between worlds needs time to arrive, that nothing, not even brightness, reaches us instantly. It is a strange thing to realize on a night like this, that the very glow reaching your eyes from that steady point in the sky tonight left it more than half an hour ago. An old letter, delivered fresh, a signal that has been quietly traveling toward you longer than you have been lying here listening. For a long while after that, the watching stayed exactly this gentle. Eyes, glass, paper, patience. Centuries passed with nothing but careful drawings of storm bands and moving moons. Then, in the last handful of decades, the watchers built messengers and sent them out instead, so the shore itself would never have to move. The first was Pioneer 10, launched in 1972, a small spacecraft carrying a simple gold plaque, the first human-made object ever to cross the asteroid belt and reach the giant planet, sailing past in 1973 close enough to send home the earliest true photographs, blurry, hesitant, astonishing. It did not linger. It could not. It simply waved as it passed, caught a gravitational nudge from Jupiter's enormous pull, and used that same danger, harmlessly borrowed, to fling itself onward out of the solar system entirely, carrying its little plaque into the dark like a bottle set adrift, still drifting even now, decades later, silent and going. Then came the two Voyagers in 1979, arriving months apart, each one pausing only briefly as it swept past on its way to the outer worlds beyond. It was Voyager that first caught, quite by accident, the faint arc of a ring around Jupiter that no one on the ground had ever seen, and the flickering orange glow of active volcanoes erupting on Io. The very moon whose eclipses had once revealed the speed of light, now revealing itself as the most restless surface in the solar system. Squeezed and kneaded by the giant's gravity until it could not stay still. The Voyagers did not slow to study. They were travelers, not residents, borrowing Jupiter's gravity the way Pioneer had. Then continuing outward, their cameras turned already toward Saturn. It took until 1995 for a spacecraft to finally stay. The Galileo orbiter, the same mission that released the small probe you heard of earlier, the one that fell into the clouds and sent back 58 minutes of readings before the pressure closed over it like water over a stone. The orbiter itself remained in orbit for 8 years afterward, circling and circling, threading carefully past the radiation and the moons, mapping the belts, watching the storms breathe, until at last, its fuel spent, it too was sent down into the atmosphere on purpose, a deliberate, careful ending, so that it could never drift and one day strike one of Jupiter's own moons and disturb whatever might be quietly waiting in the dark oceans beneath their ice. And even now, tonight, while you rest here on your own quiet shore, a fifth messenger is still out there circling, Juno. Launched in 2011, arriving in 2016, tracing those long looping polar orbits mentioned earlier, its instruments tucked safely behind titanium walls, diving close to the cloud tops, and then retreating far out again before the radiation can do it harm. Again and again, a slow, unhurried rhythm, patient the way tide is patient, sending home its postcards a little at a time. The honeycomb of storms circling each pole, the deep hum of the magnetic field, the faint glow of lightning in clouds no human eye will ever look upon directly. Juno is up there right now, in this same hour, continuing its careful loops while you lie still, its solar wings catching what little sunlight reaches so far out, its long orbit swinging it wide and free of the worst of the radiation before curving it back in for another brief, careful pass. Think, for a moment, of everything that had to stay steady for that single spacecraft to still be circling tonight. 15 years of flight and orbit, thousands of days, each one requiring nothing more dramatic than a team of quiet people watching numbers on a screen, adjusting a course by a fraction of a degree, letting the giant's own gravity do the difficult work of bending the path exactly where it was needed. No danger reached them either. The danger stayed where it has always stayed, out there, in the clouds and the belts and the crushing dark beneath, while the watchers, generation after generation of them, remained precisely as safe as you are now. Notice, if you can, how gentle every part of this discovery has been. No one touched the storm. No one flew through the radiation and came home to tell of it. A man with a hand-ground lens and a candle for light. Another with a logbook and a stubborn question about timing. A handful of small machines sent out one careful generation after another, each built a little more cleverly than the last, each one returning just enough of an answer to make the next messenger possible. Centuries of shore watching distilled, slowly, into images and numbers and a scattering of faint lines on old paper, into everything you have been given tonight without ever needing to leave where you are. That is really the whole of it. Everything dangerous about that steady light above you tonight, the storms, the lightning, the crushing pressure, the invisible tide of radiation, all of it arrived to you the same unhurried way, filtered through distance, softened by explanation, carried on light that takes its own slow time to cross the dark. You were never asked to wait out. You only had to be willing to look up, the way Galileo did, the way Armour did, the way every quiet watcher before you did, and let the answers come home on their own. The telescope can rest now. Whatever is still turning above the clouds of that far giant will go on turning, without needing to be watched any further tonight. The shore stays dark and warm around you, the light from that steady point still falling, slow and old and harmless, the way it always has, the way it always will, long after your eyes have closed and the questions have gone quiet along with everything else. Tonight has been about arriving at a far shore and finding that a giant world, seen from a safe enough distance, asks nothing of you but to look. Tonight has been about the weather you can see, the bands of amber and cream turning slowly around that vast body, the lightning flickering deep inside clouds that will never reach your window, storms wide enough to swallow whole worlds and yet painted. From here, as gently as brushstrokes drying on old paper, tonight has been about the invisible deep, the fields and the radiation and the crushing dark beneath all that color, felt only as a low hush under the surface, a pressure that belongs entirely to that far place and not to the body you are resting in right now. And tonight has been about the storm that guards the shore, that same wildness curling protectively around smaller, quieter worlds, a giant standing sentinel at the edge of things, patient and enormous, asking for nothing in return. The thread you've been holding this whole time, the one running from your chest out into that swirling dark, you can draw it back in now, slowly, without any effort at all. It was never really going anywhere without you. It only wanted to show you how far a thing can be, and how safe you can still feel, holding the far end of something so large. None of this needs anything from you tonight. Not your attention, not your understanding, not even your memory of it come morning. The storms will keep turning whether you're watching or not. The radiation will keep pulsing in its own hidden rhythm. The great red eye of that planet will keep its slow, ancient watch entirely on its own, long after your eyes have closed. You were only ever a guest here. Welcome to leave whenever the weight in your eyelids decides for you. Another quiet exploration is already waiting on the screen nearby, drifting into place on its own, and you don't have to do a single thing about it. Let it begin on its own, whenever it's ready. and let yourself already be somewhere else by then, somewhere soft and dim and folded in on itself like the inside of a cloud. And if a small question wants to loosen in you before you go, not one to answer, only one to let sit there, unhurried, the way a stone settles at the bottom of still water, you might wonder what it would feel like, just for a moment, to be small enough and safe enough to drift past a giant like that and feel nothing but curiosity. No need to solve it. Only let it drift. Feel the weight of the blanket, or the mattress, or whatever is holding you right now, holding you the way that far shore held you all night, without ever asking you to do anything but rest there. Let your breathing slow into whatever pace it wants, uncounted, unwatched. Let your hands unclench, one finger at a time, if they were ever clenched at all. Let the last of that thread coil quietly somewhere behind your ribs, warm and small, and done with its traveling for tonight. There is nowhere left to be. There is nothing left to hold. Only this. Only here. Only the last soft edge of a giant, glowing planet fading gently from view as your own eyes close. Sleep well.